Good afternoon, and welcome to the Bob Priest Show of Life podcast. I'm your host, Bob Priest. Thanks for tuning in to today's show. In last week's show, I discussed eating disorders, understanding, treatment, and recovery, and the breaking down of the devastating effects of these disorders. Today, I'm excited to have with me Taylor Angelise, who is a certified holistic nutritionist and registered molecular practitioner. That's a lot of words, Taylor.
It is.
Welcome to the show today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk health with you.
Oh, I am too. I've been fascinated since we met, and hearing your story and talking about this devastating disorder that you went through as a young person, and the journey that you had to go through to find your answers. And so tell me a little bit, what actually is a holistic nutritionist and a registered practitioner that we just mentioned? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my education is through the Institute of Holistic Nutrition here in Toronto, Canada. Basically, what a holistic practitioner is I'm educated in alternative medicine. So I don't use mainstream prescription drugs or things that are found in Western medicine, quote unquote. I believe that nutrition is all encompassing. So health is not only a physical diet, but mind, body, soul, well-being, and what nourishes those things as well. So that's where the holistic side comes into it.
Yeah, I really like that definition. I'm quite a bit older than you. I'm probably like your grandfather's age. So we're quite a bit different. So I grew up under this Western medicine mentality that here's what's going on. But typically, what seemed to happen in my situations was always a pill was thrown at it. And
Absolutely.
and as I've grown older and as I've maybe become wiser, I've started realizing that there's so many other alternatives. And also in my understanding the body more, our body's made to heal itself. And if we feed it right, if we
Yes.
put the right nutrients and the right things into our body, it's made to heal itself. So I find it fascinating that it's taken me longer than you, but there was a devastating situation in your life that kind of pushed you into this. It wasn't there.
Yes, yeah. I went through a whole series of health events that led me to this point.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? Maybe start from the beginning of, your younger life, and I'm sure you were a typical young lady, teenager, going through life, just trying to enjoy life, but something happened to you. So explain that to us.
Yeah, so as a kid, I was always a bit of a picky eater, but it wasn't to the extent that it was worrisome or that it should be monitored. I think as my life progressed on, control and restriction became a little bit more predominant. Then when I was in high school, my parents went through a really bad separation, and that kind of spiraled things out of control where eating and controlling what I was eating was the only thing I could focus on in my life. And I ended up being hospitalized for severe anorexia nervosa. This is kind of what has put me on my life's path and made me realize my life's purpose. So what came from a really dark time actually was my life's mission. So through this process, my parents were really involved. We started with family doctor because, that's where you go when you have a health issue or a health concern. I saw my family doctor for probably just under 2 years, and she really could not help me. I do not discredit medical professionals in any way. I do think they're brilliant, they're useful, but their education does not allow for these sorts of disorders to be addressed in their what I like to say scope of practice, or what they've told me. So after a couple of years, my family doctor discharged me from her practice. It was damaging our client practitioner relationship, therapeutic relationship, because I was not listening to her recommendations, which were Taylor needs to be eating this many calories a day. That's a fantastic recommendation. That's great information to know, but an eating disorder, it doesn't allow you to take that information and be like, oh, no problem. I will go ahead and do that. So at this point I was down, and to give context, I'm 5'5", and I was down to 70 pounds.
Oh my goodness. Strong wind. Yeah. You were blown away.
I was, yeah. It was painful to walk. It was painful to move. It was awful. So when I was discharged from her office, my parents were at a loss, and okay, well, what's the next in line that can help in a medical sense with eating? So we went to a dietitian. Now, for those who don't know the difference between dietitian and nutritionist or holistic nutritionist, a dietitian is government regulated, and they are regulated under a board. They are only allowed to do a certain, again, scope of practice. So when I went to this,
that's good to know. That's really good information.
Yeah. So I'm not regulated. There are guidelines and laws that I obviously have to follow, but I do not get I don't want to say plan, but a layout of what I can and can't do from the government. So I went to this dietitian, and they had no clue how to address my situation. They'd never worked with somebody with disordered eating or an eating disorder at this level. So they gave me a book with a meal plan. They said, go home and eat this. That is not.
Can I ask you a question right here?
Yeah.
Everything that you've said so far that the doctors told you to do was to eat. And the problem that you had is you didn't want to eat. There was something that created that problem. So was there more to it than just the eating side of things?
Absolutely. It was, and like you just addressed, everybody was addressing my eating. Oh, you need to eat. This is the problem. But there was no empathy or addressing the psychological and emotional side of what was going on. And you have to note that at this point, at this weight, I physically could not eat anymore. We have hormones and receptors called leptin and ghrelin, and those are what trigger our hunger cues. They tell us when we're full, when we're hungry. Those had completely stopped. I was losing all signals in my body. I never felt hungry at this point. And we also, which I learned in my later education on my own, there's refeeding syndrome. If a person at this weight just starts eating again as if nothing had happened, their body actually goes into shock. There's a huge, huge problem with that.
That makes sense.
No one had told me that. So when I was at this weight and I went home from this dietitian with this meal plan that I'm supposed to eat, when I can't eat and there's potential of refeeding syndrome, that's extremely problematic. That could have put me in a worse position than I already was.
Wow.
So that's really scary when I think back on that. It's just lack of knowledge, I guess, because I do not believe that this woman was doing it out of not caring, not being a good practitioner. It's just not what was in her scope of practice, again, quote unquote. So yeah, that didn't work out. We went to the next. We actually went back to my family doctor saying, this is not working. We don't know what to do. She's getting worse and worse. And that's when I was referred to now a psychiatrist, which was not a psychologist. So for viewers that don't know the difference between psychiatrist and psychologist, a psychologist speaks about the mental, emotional impacts of what's going on. A psychiatrist gives you a prescription. You go in for 5 minutes. That's it. You take that prescription. There's no conversation. There's no questioning. Here's your medication. Try this one for 4 weeks. Come back if it's not working. So at this point, I was completely passed off by everyone. I felt as I got to the point where I was such a burden that let's just medicate her, see if that works. And it was still not addressing anything as to why I was no longer eating.
Now, how old were you at this time?
When I went to the psychiatrist, I was now 17.
Okay.
This started aggressively when I was 14.
Okay. So in
this
your
was
early teens.
Early teens, yeah. So this was years.
Did this psychologist or psychiatrist ever address any mental disorders because of some of the things maybe you were going through with your home life or anything like that, or was that passed over as well?
No, absolutely. They told me that I was depressed. They told me I had anxiety, and they told me I had an eating disorder.
But that,
Thank you.
Thank you. You kind of already knew that, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No kidding. I do.
Yeah.
And then the answer was, here's this medication.
So yet another pill thrown at you.
Absolutely. At 17.
At 17. So another Band-Aid put on you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that I took, it was Prozac. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it was Prozac, the first medication that I was put on, and that was for depression and the eating disorder. It made me so unbelievably angry. I've never felt anger like that. And I knew, I was like, this is not the solution. This is not what I'm going to do.
Did it help you eat any better?
No, it made me feel so sick. It made me angry, lethargic, all of worse off.
Wow.
It was just, I was like, I remember laying in bed one night, and I had been to the hospital a few days prior, and they did, I'm pretty sure EKG, but where they run scans on your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the doctor looking at me and saying, your heart is stopping. You will not make it another month. And
That's a scary comment.
It was. And I remember I was there alone, and I remember going home and being like, how do I tell my family? Like, how do I tell my family that I might not wake up? And I knew that this was no longer a matter of somebody else needs to help me. It was, this is it. This is do or die. I need to take my life into my hands with my nutrition, what's going on with my psychological. Like, I have to bring myself out of this. No one is here to save me.
So that was your defining moment.
Yeah. Telling me that this is it.
Okay, so now that you've come to that defining moment, what was the next step you took? Once you had that aha, what did you do next?
So I started looking into depression and, how people can get over depression. On Google, there's honestly not really great answers. It's medication. So I came across valued living therapy, and I've held this with me my entire life. And I took it in a context as, what do I value? What is going to make me get out of bed? And I still use this in my practice, is finding that reason to keep going. And I had been on a trip to Mexico when I was 15, 16, when I was not as sick, but I was not okay. And it was the best time of my life. I actually ate when I was on that trip, like no problems. I was so happy. I felt great. And I remember laying in bed, 68 pounds, being like, I just have to get to Mexico. That's all I have to do, and I'll be okay. And that was my plan. That was my reason to keep going and my reason to keep living. So this was in June, just after my birthday. June of 2013, and I moved October of 2013. I booked a one-way flight. I found an apartment. That was the end of story. I found a roommate and I left.
Wow, that's a big step.
Yeah, it was one of those moments when I knew I was not going to heal in the place that I was in anymore. I knew that I physically had to remove myself from what was happening in this situation. So I got there and I was really scared. I had no one but myself, no family, no friends that I knew. And I was like, this is it. Like I'm either going to live or I'm gonna die here. Like there's no question about it. So a month or two went by and I was starting to make friends and feel a little bit better. And I just became infatuated with all of the different foods that they had, all of the fruit, the flavors, how they just everyone is cooking on the street. There's barbecues all the time. And little by little, I started wanting to explore those foods and the culture and be kind of a part of a community again. That's what really got me through to the point where I was healing, was a sense of community and support and being heard and being listened to, and felt like I was truly seen for myself rather than, oh, that's that girl with an eating disorder. That's that really skinny girl. And I started realizing that feeling connected and feeling these avenues of love and support, it really started to open me to a new way of living. So now fast forward through all of that, I lived there for just under a year and I came home, didn't know what I wanted to do.
So can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Prior to leaving there, did things start to change on your eating and you started putting on a little bit of weight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's a good, I should add that in there. So I just skipped by it. But yeah, while I was there, I went from 68 pounds to 110 pounds.
Oh, that's awesome. And but you were eating healthy.
Yes. Yeah. So
I
I
heard you
was,
say fruits a lot. So you're eating these things that put weight on you that typically people use to take weight off of them.
yeah. Well, and I was really excited about cooking and like making guacamoles and, tortillas and like tostadas and all of these things. I was really excited about, putting these things together and making something for myself.
How neat.
And yeah, I still have such a soft spot for Mexican food.
Well, that's one of
But
my favorite foods too. My wife
yeah,
and I, we practically live there, but
yeah,
that's a neat transition though from what you've been going through, all the pills thrown at you, all the diets, the government required diet type plan that's supposed to help
yeah,
you gain weight, and none
yeah,
of those worked. And then you go off to this other country that they eat a different way, they use different foods, different spices, etc. And all of a sudden you go from this 68-pound young woman to 110 pounds, which is a little more normal for your size, and
yeah.
you're changing. So let's go on from there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that
No,
was kind of unique.
that's That's a great question because it's important to know as well. And one thing that I should add in there as well is, eating these foods and having these healthy fats, these avocados, these fruits, meats. Again, I was starting to mentally feel clear. I I honestly, I think back on the time from 14 to 17, and I really don't have a clear memory. It's fuzzy, foggy, and it's because I was so malnourished
Mhm.
that my brain physically was not functioning at the capacity that it should.
Right.
So I didn't know at the time, but I look back on that now, and that's why I preach that what you were eating and how you were eating, it is so crucial to how you think, how you feel, what is happening inside of you.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so that,
Would you say that the way our nutrition impacts our body is going to also impact our mental health?
Absolutely, without question. And I think that's something that is still not fully understood today. It's, oh, I eat this because I need to eat, but there's no connection as to what is going in my gut is actually
Mhm.
also going to my brain. Because they do say your gut is your second brain. There's no mistake that your intestinal tract looks like a brain. Um, they're very, very connected. And it's also now being proven through the vagus nerve. All of these neurons travel up and down, back and forth. So, when you feel anxious, why do you get butterflies in your stomach? That's because these neurons are firing off. It's all connected. And what you eat is going directly to your mind.
Well, our cells have to talk to each other. That's what keeps our
Exactly.
systems working. And if our cells are damaged in some way, either malnourished or whatever, they can't communicate. And communication is the name of the game in the world of cells. So, um,
Absolutely.
now we're back home. You had a change in life, not only physically, nutrition wise, mental capacity was starting to get better. Now, how did
Mhm.
things progress from there?
Yeah. And one of the reasons I left is because I was feeling better. I was ready to, start my life again. And I decided I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to university. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went home and I was like, oh, I want an education. So I went into open studies and I actually came across anthropology and archaeology. And I was like, well, I loved the history of Mexico. I loved the ancient ruins that I saw. So maybe I should study all of these things. Throughout my degree, I was always interested in Paleolithic diet. Whenever we studied a culture, I was like, oh, what did they eat? What were they living off of? How did they thrive? How did they function? And it didn't click to me that, I was interested in the science of food. Not until 6 years later, I've done my degree in archaeology and, oh, okay, we're not doing that. Um, yeah, so really nothing happened. I continued getting better and better throughout university. I made new friends, started looking into, more spiritual aspects. I really love sound therapy. I would do a lot of sound baths. I do every night listen to 10 minutes of alpha, gamma, beta waves because I do think those frequencies impact brain function as well. I do research on it. It's still in research, but I notice a difference when I don't do it versus when I do. So that was something really important to me throughout university that I did. Um, I built a healthy relationship with exercise again through university. I found CrossFit, which, is really
Mhm.
intense, but it makes me feel really strong, really good. And I'm still doing that to this day.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So it was 6 years of really 5, 6 years of really learning myself again. And and to be clear, since that time at 17, I went on Prozac. I never took medication after that. I don't
Congratulations.
thank you. And I do tell people I don't think there's anything wrong with needing medication to get through something temporarily. I don't think it's a long-term solution what Western society is making it to be. So that's something that I really want people to know is yes, it was really hard to find these things that made me feel good, but it was so worth it in the end because at least I know this is me doing this because I want to, not because a medication is just kind of numbing out everything else.
Right.
Yeah. And then I, over COVID, the pandemic, I was like, I just had this revolution because I was home cooking a lot. I was meal prepping every day and maintaining good mental health throughout the pandemic. I'm sure for everybody was very, very difficult.
Sure.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I know I got into some really low points. I was just like, when this might never end. What if I'm just in my house for the rest of my life? What am I doing? And I was like, man, I love where I've come. I love nutrition. I love my story. And that's when I went into Institute of Holistic Nutrition, kind of full circle.
Wow,
And
that's cool.
yeah, and I've really kind of journeyed through. I graduated in, when was it? Last summer, so almost a year ago. And I've found myself in what I want to do over the last year or so. And it's mental health for me. I'm like taking my hardship and my story and making sure that people know it's not one way. You don't have to heal one way. There are so many avenues that are actually far better off for you and will sustain health long term.
So with that said, you went to the practitioners, and we all have, and we have to trust them that they're going to help us find our way through whatever it is that we're dealing with. And you didn't find that necessarily. I mean, you knew they were trying, you knew they were giving their best efforts, but you still found that you had to find what worked for Taylor. And so
Absolutely.
you went on that walkabout, as the Aussies would say.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the top recommendations that you have for transitioning into a more holistic way of living? If I were
So
wanting
for
to do that, which I do, and I am, but what would you
yeah,
suggest?
so for me, one thing that's really important that I tell people is you cannot do it all at one time.
Mhm.
I think when individuals want to transition or go into this new way of living, it's really overwhelming. And it's where do I even start?
Right.
So my things for me is, look what you're buying. When you're shopping, try to stay as local and to the source as you can. I mean, I know that farmers markets or organic food, I get this argument all the time that, oh, it's more expensive. I don't have the money for that. But then, a lot of these people are getting a Starbucks every day or, going out for dinners every other day. And it's like, it really is. And it's hard to hear its priorities because I live in Toronto. I'm on my own out here. I have a number of bills just like everybody else, but making sure that I'm buying organic when I can and locally when I can, it's a priority for me because it does make me feel better. It does make the difference. One of the biggest toxins that enters our system, which gives our body a sense of overload, is from pesticide use. And that stays with us. So that's my number one place to start.
Okay.
Um,
Good advice.
yeah, thank you. And looking what you're buying in the home. Cleaning products, huge one. There are so many lines now that are green that don't use harmful, harsh chemicals. One that I use, which I don't know if it would be available to the US, but it might be, is called Attitude. So Attitude is a really, really affordable, cheap brand line, and it's great products. I use them all the time. I order them off Amazon. Again, Amazon Canada, so I don't know, but there are so many
Wow.
that it's
So,
easy to find.
so it's really, again, goes back to education and
Yeah,
educating ourselves on not only the foods that we're putting in our body and the nutrients, but also the things we put on our body as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Because
Go
oh,
ahead.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we do have a thing which I kind of touched on just a minute ago. Each our bodies have a limit. It's a toxic limit load.
Mhm.
And how it's been explained to me is we're like a barrel and you keep adding these harmful things, adding, and it's eventually going to overflow. And
Right.
this is when you see, you know, individuals with extreme chemical sensitivity, allergies, skin flare-ups. These are all indications of toxic overload, and it's because of environment and what we're putting in our body.
Exactly. I agree with you 100% on your assessment of all that. So, we've heard a lot over our lifetime of supplemental, natural supplements. People have used antioxidants and things like that. When that kind of came about. What are your maybe top recommendations in that regard to like natural supplements that you would utilize on a daily basis that could help our bodies to be better vessels that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few that I take every day, which I recommend everyone do so. So I take magnesium glycinate every day. It really helps with the body leveling out and adapting to mood and stressors. And it's calming, it has a calming effect as well. So I do take that. Another one is zinc, I take every day. Zinc is really important for immunity, cell function, health, and especially men. It's more important for men as well. It's for reproductive purposes. So I recommend that to everybody. Omega 3s,
Mm-hmm.
omega 3 fatty oils for brain health. This one is specifically important because in today's diet, or our standard American diet, it's very high in omega 6s. We need that proper omega 3 to omega 6 ratio. When omega 6 is too high, this is when we see oxidative damage and inflammation happening in the body. This is
Right.
really hard on cell function, which I'm sure you're nodding. So that's really important. So balancing that out. And again, omega 3 fatty acids, your brain basically is just a big lump of fats and protein.
Right.
So
My
that's all
wife's
it is.
told me that numerous times.
Yeah. So, you have to feed that fat chunk like properly. um, so those are really important. What is so I said magnesium glycinate, zinc, omegas, and I recently started taking a probiotic every day, just so that I'm feeding my brain function and I'm feeding my gut with healthy bacteria. Um, I do recommend, there's different levels. People get really confused about probiotics because, there's 15 billion CFUs or 30 billion. And it's always, where do I start? Which one do I get? Because there are so many. If you are somebody that has never taken a probiotic, start at 30 billion. You'll see on the bottle, it will say 30 billion. That's a really good one. It's a low dose. It's not going to irritate the stomach. As you get more comfortable to that bacteria and that healthy bacteria growth, you can keep going up and up. The 150 billion is a good one. I take that, but I'm also, what do you say, acclimatized or climate? I'm adapted to that level.
Right. Right.
And this also prevents the overgrowth of candida, which is a yeast. Very, very common. Almost every person in today's day and age has it because of the sugar use in our modern food. Yeah.
And even with us not taking sugar, adding sugar to our whatever we're eating, there's still sugar in these products.
Yeah,
I have found
absolutely.
out. Yeah, I have a friend, a nurse friend, that she calls sugar America's cocaine, and she's always
It
saying,
is.
cut it out because you're just feeding your addiction.
Yeah.
So the good news is I wrote down your list, and I take all those already. In fact,
Amazing.
I take a few other things too. I take D3 and I take
Yeah.
alpha. How do you say?
Linoleic acid.
There you go. I take that one as well. Say that again for our listeners.
Alpha linoleic acid, or ALA.
Yeah. um,
Yeah, that's a good. I take a few other things too. There's some herbal supplements that I take, but
yeah. I've over time I've learned, but I was a lucky guy. My doctor, after I had my stroke, um, And my doctor, initially I had to get started on different medicines to bring down blood pressure and sugar and all this stuff that was out of whack because of my stroke. Before that,
Mhm.
they weren't out of whack. But he was also a very smart man, and he didn't want me on that stuff for long. And he told me that. And so
Mhm.
along the way, he started adding some of these supplements that you mentioned and several others that I was on. And I no longer take medications after many years of having to go through all that. And I'm glad to say that. But again, became a research project for me as well, like it did for you. Um, how is
Amazing.
how has North America culture dramatically shifted away from holistic living?
Yes, I love to talk about this one as well. I think it's a huge problem, especially in, big cities where I'm at. I notice a huge difference between Calgary and living in Toronto. And it's just based on size, fast-paced culture. I do see here it's very easy to shift away from that because of I have to get so many things done in a day. I don't have time for myself. I don't have the effort to do that. It's very sad when people tell me I don't have time because of my lifestyle here. And we're building that. We're creating that life here, especially in Toronto. It's that rat race, fast paced. I don't need to eat, sleep, do anything other than work, create productivity. And it's scary. It's scary to watch.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting, and you're not quite 30 yet, if I remember correctly.
Two
Um,
more years.
Two
Two more
more
years.
years, so you're still young. But I grew up, I've lived through that life, and I'm on a different side of it. And quite honestly, I've changed my pace. After the stroke, I was forced to do that, but I also mentally had to learn to change my pace after that stroke
Yeah,
because I still wanted to get back into that rat race, as you called it. And I've been more focused on all aspects of my life, not just that work, go to work, come home, go to work, come home. I realized that I was really out of balance. And so
yeah,
if there's anything I could leave on here as part of our conversation is, and you brought it up, and I'm glad to hear you say that, is we've got to learn to have that balance, whether it's eating balance,
yeah,
work-life balance, family balance, or our bodies do give out and they crash at some point. And so what good is all that stuff that we're doing if we can't actually finish the purpose maybe we have in life? So
absolutely.
I'm glad to hear you say that. What are some common illnesses or diseases that can fully be or prevented using holistic methods of approaches and nutrition?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot, and I, I I might not now say fully because there's always the case of genetics but genetics is a very small part. A lot a lot of illnesses can be prevented by just caring about your nutrition and your well-being. Type 2 diabetes, huge one. It's a huge problem um, in modern society. And that's blood sugar. And I say type 2. Type 1, very different. But this can be reduced and prevented with holistic health and well-being. A lot of anxiety, depression. I work with clients with coming to me with these symptoms, doing the same thing as me. I don't want to be on medication. What can I do? A lot of these things are the brain not being nourished and the brain not receiving what it needs in order to function properly. So these symptoms can be dramatically, if not fully eradicated with proper health and lifestyle. Other ones, there's evidence of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, heart disease. All of these things are nutrition based and are very prominent with poor diet. So yeah, those are just a few.
That's some good information, Taylor. So I think maybe my last question today is going to be, where do you see the future of holistic health going?
I think we're slowly getting there, but I do think it is going to be more prominent and more important in people's lives going forward. I see a bit of a shift after the pandemic. I think a lot of people realized that when things really go sideways, you have yourself to rely on. You know, there was a lot of people needing medical support. It wasn't available.
Right.
I don't know about in the US. Here in Canada, you could not go to the doctor for nearly a year unless it was you were actually needing a hospital bed, a severe medical issue. So I think a lot of people realized, you know, I am responsible for my health. I'm responsible for maintaining that. And if this were to happen again and I need support, they don't want to be in that position where they're unhealthy or needing outside help, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So I think it's a shift towards taking responsibility. I know for myself, I would feel much better being my doctor to myself because I know what I'm feeling. I know what's going on. And it's a lot easier to gauge that if I have the education and the knowledge behind it, rather than going to somebody who doesn't know me, doesn't know what I'm feeling. It's just an explanation and their best guess as to these are the symptoms. This is probably what's happening.
You probably haven't been to a Western doctor in a bit based on our conversations, and I'm just assuming that, but you know, I still go in for checkups and things like that. And you know, some of the things that have really changed over my tenure of life, back in the day, they used to actually put their hands on you and they would touch and poke and feel and you know, do some serious intervention kind of things. Now it's all conversation.
Yeah.
They'll listen to your heart, they'll listen to you breathe, but you know, they don't even do prostate exams like they used to. Now it's just blood work. And I have doctor friends that are old school doctors that one just recently was asking me about that. And I said, no, they don't do that. And he goes, you cannot make a judgment about that particular organ through a blood test totally. And so, you know, it's changed so drastically. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the changes have come from a source that has nothing to do with our health and well-being, and that's called insurance. But that's just my opinion in this conversation. But Taylor, I am so impressed with you, and you know, I know that your journey has been a tough one. And but you know, number one, you're a strong woman, and boy, you're empowered. You took it upon yourself at such an early age to just say, "Chuck this, I'm going to find out on my own." And you know, taking that big step just to go to Mexico at the age you were, and that's huge. I don't know that I would have made that kind of in a normal setting, much less because my health was out of whack. But you did that, and look at the person you've become because you've been willing to get up every time you got knocked down, and you researched. You went into one field, but which kind of led you into another field because of your love of history, and that took you into another thought process. So, you know, I see you as a thought person, as someone that really sits and concentrates and uses that protein mass that you were talking about a minute ago called our brain to not only better yourself, but to bring purpose to our world and open up our world to some new thought processes that worked. Obviously, they worked. You're standing here today. At one point, you're 68 pounds. You're hanging on for dear life. Your mental acuity was really at its lowest. Probably your emotional well-being was at its lowest. You weren't getting answers. I know you had support from family and friends, but sometimes that's just not enough.
Yeah.
And so I really give you big kudos for um, what you went through and learned and came out the other side now with even a bigger purpose in life. So congratulations to you, Taylor. And I'm anxious to put this up on my podcast and hopefully that people will come and hear this, and that young women and even men, young guys that deal with these kinds of issues. And something that we kind of didn't hit on, I want to make sure that people know, um, there's three types of or common types of eating disorders. Is that correct? Can you tell
Yes.
can you tell us those three again?
Yeah. So the most common being, oh, maybe I'm going to get it wrong. I don't know. I think it's bulimia, but anorexia and then binge purge eating disorder.
That's what my findings were.
Okay.
And according to the National Eating Disorder Association, I didn't even know there was one. An,
Yes.
an eating disorder is a mental condition that affects person's eating behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. Would you agree with that
Yes,
statement?
absolutely.
Okay. So, in our conversation, I'm always thinking about ways that I can add value back to you. And you've got a huge story, huge story. So here's a potential title for a book for you. Why I Lost My Love for Food and Then Found It.
I love that. I
Why
got
I
chills.
Lost My Love for Food and Then Found It.
I
So
love
I really encourage you to start pondering on that. So before we end our podcast today, tell our listeners how to reach you. What's your website? What's your email? Maybe say and spell your name for us so we can have that. And I'll also have that information on my podcast so people can see that when they pull this up.
absolutely. Yeah. So um I guess I'll start by saying that I do work internationally. So I'm based in Canada, but that does not mean I don't see clients from all over the world. I am based solely online right now. Um, yeah, my website name is, or my company name is Unalome Nutrition. Unalome is a Buddhist symbol for the path to enlightenment, because that's what I like to say I bring my clients through, is from a really dark place to a place of enlightenment.
So
So
spell that for our listeners.
yeah, so that's spelled Unalome and then nutrition. So Nutrition. So Unalome Nutrition.
And what's the call letters at the end? Is it com or
And CA, because it is Canadian. So it's www.unalomenutrition.ca.
okay, great. And how can
Yeah.
they reach you through an email?
Yeah. So my email is taylor@unalomenutrition.ca, because again, Canadian.
Okay. And would you like to leave a phone number if anyone would like to call
Yes.
you?
Yeah, I have my business line. It is 647. It's the area code 484-2628. And I do see both men and women as well. I see up to 10 years old and up.
Okay. Well, listen, this has been so enlightening for me, and you are such a delight. I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the past couple of months and having conversations with you about your life's journey and where it's brought you to today. And I wish you such success in your practice and the direction that it's going. I find you very fascinating. And I'm
Thank
sure
you.
that people that listen to this will find your story to be encouraging. And I hope that they reach out to you, not only to get to know you as a person, but also as a practitioner of the holistic nutrition. We're going to sign off now, but don't go anywhere, okay?
No problem.
Folks, thank you for listening today to our podcast. This has been enlightening for me to have Taylor with us, but reach out to Taylor if you know someone that's got issues with eating disorders, or just reach out to her to get to know her, because I have found her to be such a delightful young woman. You guys have a great day, and to our next session, we'll be back in a week. Have a great day.